endless topics. In this episode, we discuss everything from interspecialty collaboration to supporting the family's full experience to calling out that thriving in a high-stress environment like L&D or the NICU isn't mutually exclusive to practicing with a foundation of compassion. We are honored to be joined by Rose Horton as our special guest. Rose's work is phenomenal. You guys are in for a treat. Here is her esteemed bio. Rose Horton, MSM, RNCOB, NEABC, CPSHE, FAAN, is a founder and CEO of NotOnMyWatch Consulting Partners, an LLC she created 3 years after coining the hashtag NotOnMyWatch. In this role, she provides consulting for healthcare organizations, keynotes, and teams training. She created the hashtag out of frustration at the rising rate of maternal and infant morbidity and mortality. As an executive nurse leader, she believes that nurses, as the largest healthcare employee contingent, have the power to change the trajectory of morbidity and mortality. The hashtag is a call to action for all nurses to use their collective voice to support, listen to, advocate for, and follow evidence-based practices in caring for all birthing people. Rose was inducted as a Fellow of the American Academy of Nursing, FAAN, nursing's highest honor. She served as the 2025 President of the Association of Women's Health Obstetrics and Neonatal Nurses, AWON, a 25,000 nurse member association that is pivotal in creating, supporting, legislating, and researching best practices in evidence-based care for women and newborns. Rose also serves on the executive committee for the National Network of Perinatal Quality Collaboratives and is on the Healthy Birthday Board of Directors. Rose is the Executive Director of Maternal Health of Huggies Healthcare. We are so grateful that Rose is joining us for some circle time. Let's jump into the conversation. I'm very fond of you and your work. And when we were thinking about someone who could join as a guest, you were one of the first people that popped into my head because you're such a good speaker about very difficult topics, which is typically what we do here, is talk about really heavy things in a way that is hopefully accessible and maybe not always comfortable, but hopefully promotes access to safety at the same time. And your passion for the pregnant population is just palpable when you talk. And so I was like, she would be perfect if she's game to join us for a little circle time.
Thank you.
Really welcome this opportunity to have Rose with us because I think all too often we get in our little bubble of the NICU and we forget about the person that was just recently attached to this tiny human, right? Like physically attached, still emotionally attached. And we forget about the family. I don't think that we have opportunity to really sit down with our colleagues who should be our partners in all of this, right? And really talk about what they're feeling, what we're feeling. I know I am highly guilty of this. And that if I am in a situation where something is going on with the mother, I'm running, right? I have the baby. I'm not in that, right? I feel terrible for her and the family, but I'm not in that. And so I think that we take that opportunity to really think about how we should be engaging more with each other and potentially could some of that improved engagement, collaboration, teamwork assist with both outcomes that we're trying to improve upon.
Something just popped in my head. Two things. I'm going to start with the first one that popped in my head. I was doing a meeting for some folk who had attended a session that I did. We do something called a cohort meeting so that we can have conversation after they've watched an educational video. And this cohort had a fair number of NICU nurses and NNPs in it. And during one conversation, an NNP was just talking about how she feels emotionally when she goes into the room of into labor and delivery room of a pregnant patient, and that the parent, in her estimation, hasn't made the best decision as it relates to the baby. And she said, my priority is always the baby, and then she went further into discussing some other things. And after she was done, I said, I just want to unpack a couple of things that you just said. I said, first of all, your priority is the baby. I said, I understand as an NNP that is your primary patient. I said, but I think in 2026 that we have over prioritized the baby and we've excluded the fact that without the parent, there would be no baby. And the parent ultimately is a decision maker, and we don't get to vote as to if their decision is correct. If it's not correct, if it's evidence based, we don't get a vote. You know, our job is to show up and to be supportive, to be nurturing, to make sure we're bringing energy into the space of cultural humility. And we had a conversation, and I could tell that she bristled a little bit at the feedback. And, and at the end of the session, um, she said, after many people have talked and we had other conversations, she said, Rose, I really appreciate the point you made about the energy that we bring into a space. And I felt like, well, that's a win. If there was one thing that she could take away, though she felt emotionally maybe challenged, I felt like that was a win. But I do worry sometimes, as you talk, Tracy, about the need for us to be collaborative. I do worry that sometimes in those settings, we over prioritize the baby. Um, and I would love for us to all hold space for the person we're looking at, which is the parent, right? And how do we support them and how do we give them information in a way that they can take it in and understand and not feel threatened or challenged or maybe stigmatized by what we say.
This is a really nuanced discussion, which is kind of, I'm excited about this, right? I'm not excited that we have to have it because I wish we didn't, but I am excited to get to have it, right? Because I think a lot of NICU clinicians will say that they're centering the baby, but a lot of times it's centering our understanding, like as a clinician, our understanding of the situation without understanding that this person, fresh little baby, and the person in which that they came from a community, and they have their own expectations and culture and relationships and love and all of these things that have to come into play into the decisions that they make. And it's easy for us to look on paper or in Epic or whatever, EMR you use, and look at it and be like, this, and this means that this is the exact decision that needs to be made and any other decision is wrong. And things are just not that simple, right? And when you're talking about harming another patient, thinking of all the recent horrific stories we've heard, seen in the news about forced C-sections and things like that in the middle of labor, when you're like, we're not even giving autonomy to this person in the vein of trying to save autonomy for somebody else, but we don't have any evidence that that is actually going to happen, right? And it is very harmful to set the precedent that one patient automatically is more important than the other. Because really and truly, they are both equally important and should have a equal stake at a chance here, right? And the overreach is so close to happening. I mean, it's already happening, honestly, but like the extension of the overreach is like, where are we going to stop this? In the name of what? And we feel very sanctimonious, right? Because I'm doing the right thing, but right by whose standard, right? Whether you're talking about mode of delivery or whether you're talking about parent presence at the bedside, whether you're talking about infection prevention, like a lot of us in the ICU, we tend to take things to the nth degree without realizing the harm that we're causing in taking over in that very parentified kind of management of patients.
Oh my God, I love this conversation. So a couple of thoughts percolated up as everyone was chatting. Recently, it was probably 25 now, but there was this wicked awesome paper by Wolf et al. The gist of it was looking at that continuum, looking at the babies that arrive to us in the NICU are literally representative of, an extensive history that preceded their birth, that was influenced by a myriad of factors, not just the uterine capsule, but like all of the things that fed that little capsule, from nutrition, from love, from a sense of belonging, from economic variable, like the whole kit and caboodle. And so, my takeaway from the paper, but the gist, was if we can really prioritize more on that family, of origin, right? I mean, literally and figuratively, then, the individuals that we're caring for in the NICU would be so much better presented to us. I'm not sure I'm using the right language here. I'm trying to be thoughtful about it, but I think we've divorced ourselves from our humanity to such an extent that I think we're completely blind to it. That as healthcare providers, we're completely, it seems, disconnected from the real influence that the social systems and the social structure and all of the other insidious phenomena that define and inform how we show up in our day to day, and how that filters into how we show up in the NICU, right? We're super competitive, we're ego driven. And I love nurses and physicians and healthcare professionals. I'm not trying to throw everybody under the bus, but we need to wake up to that reality if we really want to lean into the full spectrum of what it means to be, a healer, a carer, and all that kind of stuff. But we think that the power lies in this hierarchical binary structure that will somehow distinguish me as super special. And I don't think that people come to this consciously, but when I sitting in this moment and recalling how it felt to me as a nurse practitioner in the NICU, I'll be honest with you, it was super exciting when I could do some life-saving stuff. And I was thinking about how wicked cool that felt for me. I was totally happy that the baby was alive, and oh, and they have a family. But did I really fully understand or even express any genuine interest about what that all meant? I'll be honest with you, no. And I'm not a bad person, but I am playing out how I've been acculturated into the system and into this work and stuff like that. And so I know it gets wicked messy, but I think until we really start to get curious about the why of all of these things, we won't be able to disentangle it. We're going to just kind of keep coming at it and get kind of defensive, like when you say things that make me feel uncomfortable, instead of getting curious. And even, I'm sure, Rose, I can only imagine it must have, your intention for that cohort was to help folks feel safe, as safe as you can facilitate, right? But people bring their own stuff. And so, kudos to the chick for saying something positive at the end. And I'm hoping that the seeds that you planted, are taking root and germinating, maybe even now as we speak. But that's a hard process. And particularly when our educational systems don't really fully, consistently invest in that kind of pedagogy, of reflection and thoughtfulness and community learning and all that other cool stuff.
Wow, that's great. That was so great. You said a lot of things, and I wonder if we can just have a conversation. Something that you said, Jesse, made me curious about a conversation. You were saying that the parent and the infant, the neonate, the fetus, whatever term people appreciate the most. I appreciate baby. The parent and the baby are equally important. And it just made me think because somebody reached out to me recently who's planning a conference, and they're like, Rose, do you know anyone that's really great at the topic of informed consent? And I was like thinking about that. So, from an informed consent perspective, I'm just curious with lovely NICU experts here. I'm just curious, does the concept of informed consent elevate the parent's importance over the neonate's importance or no? Just a question.
Yeah, let me sit and think, because I think that's an interesting thought, because there is an inherent hierarchy there that isn't, not all hierarchies don't have to be harmful. I mean, often they are, but they don't have to be,
Agreed.
because yes, the parent would need to have enough access to information, which informed consent is a whole treasure trove in itself, and how we facilitate and don't facilitate that, right? Which is
Yeah.
sidebar, but
Mhm.
they would need to have access to information to make the safest decision, not only for themselves, but for their child, right? Whether you're talking about someone who is still an inside person, right, who has not entered the world yet, or someone who is out in the NICU or in mother baby or however. That is very interesting, because my gut instinct, and I might end up changing my mind as I ramble, so bear with me. But like my gut instinct is, I think all people are inherently worthy and important. So I'm hesitant to say that someone is more or less than, but I do think there's more or less responsibility in the parties, if that makes sense. Which then again, I love to put it back on us, because we chose this weird career, right? And having to help navigate people through some of the best and worst times of their lives. So we have an inherent responsibility to make sure that they have what they need to be able to fulfill their responsibility, without going home and thinking, if I had known X, I wouldn't have made Y decision. But also not fear mongering to the point of, well, if you don't have a C-section, you're going to die. Okay, well, that's just dramatic. And we don't actually know that that's true, right? Or that your baby is going to die, or, any of those things.
Complex concept too, because you think about, ethically or morally, and I'm not sure, where they cross over, the ethics and morality of it. But if you're speaking to an adult during a life-threatening situation of their most precious, treasured joy, and they are freaking out, is that really informed consent? Because their cortex is really not fully online. And whatever information they have been exposed to, again, reminding ourselves that just because words are flying out of my mouth doesn't mean that anything is registering on the other side of that other person's, cortex. I think it just gets really murky and muddy, but it feels like super generalization here that, well, it's a box that we have to tick off, so I have to ask. But if you answer incorrectly, or if you do something, I also know that I have an off ramp, and I can circumvent that, and, and do all of these other things. So it feels, I think, quintessentially, it's an important component, but I think we don't appreciate and don't get curious about how do we really ensure that it really truly is informed consent. Because if I'm the parent, I don't know what I don't know. So I don't know what to ask you. And all I'm getting is what you're telling me. And you're telling me, to a degree, your biased opinion about X, Y, and Z. And I'm not saying that that's evil. I believe that you're well intended, but I don't think that you appreciate that what you're telling me is biased. You think just because I'm reporting facts from the latest, systematic review or something is not biased, but is it,
Well, I will say that I agree with you, Mary, and again, very generalizable, and I will speak for myself on this aspect, that in many cases, it does feel like that box you're checking, right? Especially if, again, I love your words on this, so I will take some of them, but that biased thought of, this is what's best for this baby. It is best for this child to get a PICC line. So in my informed consent, okay, so this is very standard. This is what we do. It's the best thing for the baby. I have to tell you all these scary things because the lawyers say I have to, right? But it is so rare that they really happen. So I would say that if I am only looking at myself, because I don't want to speak for anybody else, if I'm only looking at myself, I would say, in answer to your question, Rose, it is about the baby, right? And I'm doing the things because the lawyers say I have to, and I can't do it without the parent saying yes. But am I really thinking about what they know about this? Now, in that same vein, I think there are other things that maybe in some institutions wouldn't even be considered a need for informed consent. And I'm thinking predominantly right now about dexamethasone therapy, right? And in some hospitals, it is not a signed informed consent, but at least documentation that we've had that conversation with the family and with the parents. And in that aspect and in that vein, I really do think that depending upon how it is portrayed, could be more so for the parents because you truly want them to comprehend as much as they can understand because we're throwing a ton of scientific medical information, sometimes at persons who have never even been to the doctors themselves, right? And yet we're telling you, okay, so we're talking about this medication that potentially could do this, but it's also going to improve this. We're trying to make it so that your child does this, and it's just like, right? So I think we have best intent. I don't know that it is always delivered in the way to achieve that best intent. And then sometimes I think we don't have best intent. I think sometimes it's like, this is what we need to do. This is what we want to do. We know, according to the literature, this is the best thing for this child. So I just need you to say yes, because I'm going to do it. Right? So just say yes.
It's like that CYA approach, kind of,
Right?
But Trace, when you were speaking, what you made me realize is if we don't do these or approach these important things grounded on a relationship that is grounded in trust. I get that's what I'm trying to say. If you don't trust me, and there are things I have to do to earn your trust, just because I've got the alphabet soup and the stethoscope around my neck. I might think I'm super trustworthy, but I'm still, a stranger to you. And, you were kind of mentioning, Tracy, about just, maybe I've never gone to the doctors. And maybe the reason why I've never gone to the doctors is because from a cultural perspective, we've been taught that, these folks are not going to serve you. They're not here in your best interest. And so recognizing that, I think, Rose, you used the word humility earlier and stuff, all of these factors play into it, but I think we still have a super checkbox mentality to these things that unless we truly embrace the urgency of respectful, trust-based relationships, we're not really going to make any headway, I think, in really serving the continuum, not the hierarchy, but the spectrum of the human beings that we get to engage with in the work that we do.
I love it. I love all of it. Something else that informed this question. I was reading this article. It's not a peer-reviewed journal. I think it was, a magazine, but it was a story of a Black couple. And what I remember her saying, I don't even remember the details. I didn't go into the details about the difficulty associated with pregnancy. And she was headed to the OR and her partner was with her. And she looked at him, as they're being wheeled to the OR, and um, she said, if it comes down to it, please save me. She's like, save me. And I remember, and just saying it, I feel like super emotional. I remember feeling like, ooh, why does she even have to say that, right? Because going to your comment, Mary, about we should be trusting of the healthcare organizations that we're going to. We should trust that they have our best interests at heart, that of course their objective is to save everyone. But she felt like she needed to just put it out there. She's like, save me. She's like, when I'm not able to talk for myself, I want you to tell anybody who needs to hear that I am the priority and I need you to, I want to be saved. Because I know I've been in situations as a labor and delivery nurse, 30 years now. I've been in situations where the parent, the patient is saying, do whatever you can to save the baby. The baby's the priority, so I've heard that. But I've never heard the save me. And I think it's reflective of the times that we live in, that others, going back to that hierarchy, others are prioritizing for the patient. And she just needed to be heard. That she's like, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Save me.
Yeah, it just, I mean, one, imagine the pressure
Right?
on that partner or support person or whatever identity they have to them, because you could sub in anybody. It could be somebody's mom, grandma, whoever,
Right.
right? And imagine the pressure that they have to hold capacity and possibility that you're the one who gets to choose, and you want to honor this when you're torn. Like the trauma is just rife for all parties, really, in that. And shame on us for letting it get to this kind of place where someone actively has to plead to be saved. That is just so deeply sad, which is, and even saying it that way feels like an understatement. Like I can't put it into words. Um, I
Right.
the whole time we were talking about informed consent, there's been a lot of talk in the NICU world. And, Rose, you might be aware whether or not it's happening in the OB world, because I am tangential and stay connected, but not nearly, by no means an expert, about shared decision making.
Mm-hmm.
And on its face, I'm with it. I'm here, like, yes, like we should absolutely
Mm-hmm.
do it. But in
Mm-hmm.
some ways, and maybe this is my own systems distrust, because I have a lot of that, despite the privilege in which I get to function in those systems it's, I worry that it's going to be co-opted and just become another way for us to blame the patient when something goes wrong. So
Mm.
things like, well, we did shared decision making on the decision to do dexamethasone or some kind of steroid treatment. Well, when he gets a brain bleed, well, she chose this. But when you're presenting things
Mm.
in a binary, which we often tend to do, because again, they're not coming like to, I think it was Mary earlier, you had the point of like, they're not coming with this full background of healthcare education and things like that. And we're not doing all the time doing our best work at explaining the best we can to this for this person to actually make a good shared decision, right? So then when they get a brain bleed or have some developmental delays, you can be like, well, that was the choice that was made. They decided that, I didn't. And it's just, it feels, I'm nervous because I feel like a good thing could very quickly become a not good thing because it could end up being co-opted into a way to blame families and patients for outcomes that we should shoulder at least some of that responsibility as well as the professional in the space. And this is where you get into the debate of it all, right? Because you don't want to make every decision for them, but you also want to make sure if you're asking them to choose, you're not putting everything into them. I think like, you ask your toddler, what do they want for dinner? Like sometimes it's just like, what are you literally going to eat so you can go to bed? But you're not going to sit there and be like, okay, well now you got to meal prep and you got to figure out how we're going to get to the grocery store. Like you have to give it an appropriate amount of responsibility for the role. Not that patients seeking healthcare are toddlers, but like trying to come up with some kind of analogy of when the power dynamics are inherently skewed, then we have to embrace that and figure out how can I do more to share that power, which in this sense would be sharing more knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
But I think your analogy of a toddler actually goes into play when you're thinking about those situations, which they're rare, right? Because most people don't go into it with this mindset. Because I just want to make sure that nobody's saying that I'm insinuating this is the way it always happens. But when you're talking about that toddler, and let's take it to the aspect of, okay, you want to wear those shorts and a t-shirt and it's 40 degrees outside. So when you're cold, you'll learn. And next time you won't do this, right? And so when you were talking about the parents and saying, if we give you this decision making, this shared decision making, and you make this decision, and then you decided not to consent to a PIC line. So now look, your baby's stuck 6 times for a PIV. You'll learn, right? And so I'm sure that there are some people who look at it in that mindset and that fine, let them do whatever they want to do. We'll teach them a lesson, and next time they will trust us. Not right, not okay, right? But I'm saying that I do think that that probably does happen. And I don't even know that people are doing it. I want to believe that people don't
Intentionally.
do it intentional because I
Right.
don't think we're all bad people, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that sometimes it's just I don't know how to get across and connect with this particular family. So let them make bad choices. They will learn, and then they'll come back and realize that I'm the expert. Again, I'm probably saying it in a way that is going to offend so many people, but it's just my thought that I see it sometimes. And again, I don't know how to navigate being parental versus being controlling versus being completely hands off because I don't think it's fair to put all of this weight on the parents either. right? Like, how can I ask you to make this decision?
Well, what was running through my head is, I mean, this is a great topic as well, to kind of really start to dissect down where are the disconnections. And it kind of made me come back to like, so before we even start talking about the opportunities and some of the pitfalls, not that it's not a good thing to do shared decision making with families, but kind of like pull it back home and examine how do we do shared decision making as a team? Because if we don't do that well,
Mm,
ain't going to do it good with the families. We're just not
mhm,
because that's our default setting. So,
mm,
you were making me think about like, so what
mhm,
does shared decision making look like in my team? I'll be honest with you.
mhm,
I don't know that I actually have experienced that because for the bulk of my career, it was usually hierarchical. The decision
mhm,
making just happened that way. Um, People could say what they wanted, and there was some, discussions where you could say what you wanted and you felt like you were an influencer. But there were also a lot of experiences where it didn't matter. It's like, this is who's on this month. This is how it's going down. And you just kind of know. So I think that's kind of our proving ground, I think. If we aren't able to have respectful, collaborative decisions and not like you said, Trace, because sadly I know exactly what you're talking about. And all right, we'll try it Mary's way. And once it all goes, pear-shaped, we all know we can't trust Mary anymore to make a decision. We're just going to go with, whoever, is in charge. That no one
mhm.
learns from that. You know what I learn? I learn is that I can't trust you. I learn
Exactly that.
I learn what it feels like to have a bus drive over me, like no thank you.
Mhm,
That's what happens to the family. So I think, kind of if we don't practice that, then we're not going to do it well with those that
mhm,
we, are privileged to work with.
mhm, mhm. What a great thought. We learn it by doing it with the team, experiencing it with the team first. So when I talk about shared decision making, which I talk about a lot, one of the nuances of shared decision making that I think is vitally important is sharing all of the options, right? And I'm going to do it for um, labor and delivery. I'll give a labor and delivery analogy. So if you have a family who comes in, you have a patient who comes in and she really wants an unmedicated birth, right? How do we allow for, let me take away that allow. We don't allow because we're not their parent. How do we create an environment where she has all of the information so that she could be successful in her desire for an unmedicated birth, right? So what I think is vitally important to say is, all right, tell me a little bit more about what this unmedicated birth looks like for you so that I have an understanding. Well, I definitely don't want an epidural. I want to be able to move around as much as I can during labor. And, I want to listen to my body. Great. Thank you for informing me. Here are a couple of things that I think that we can do, right? And I give her, because it's almost always never just about the epidural. If you don't want the epidural, that's great. Let me tell you what we have as options, right? We have nitrous oxide. Have you heard about it? And I'll tell her the whole thing about nitrous oxide. I said, we have medications that we can give you in your IV. We're going to put an IV in, but we're not going to put any tubing and we're not going to give you fluid. We just need access, and tell her why we need access, because down the line something may happen and then all your veins disappear. And I hate it when that happens, right? And I make it fun and I make them laugh about it. You can get up and ambulate. Right? We have this wonderful wireless monitor, so you can ambulate. We can try the peanut ball. You can jump in the shower. You can get in the tub. I feel like shared decision making is focusing on the buffet of options and not the toddler. You can have green beans or you can have chicken nuggets, right?
Mhm.
Because you want them to choose chicken nuggets because they need protein. So you make that the two options. And I'm like, oh, chicken nuggets, of course. So I think it's important for us to, in all fairness, if we said it's going to be shared decision making, they need to be informed of what are the options because you're not going to know, right? So how do we hold space for that we share? And if they ask questions, oh, I didn't know about nitrous. Tell me a little bit more about that. Oh, I knew about the birthing ball. I didn't know about the peanut ball. So that as labor progresses, they're mindful. Of course, I'm there and reminding, this may be a really great time to try the peanut ball. What do you think? Do you feel like that? You want to jump into the shower for a few minutes? So that's how I envision, and I've always practiced shared decision making by ensuring that we're sharing all of the option. And I think it's really, really important to hold space, Mary and Tracy, for the fact that what is the energy that I'm bringing into it? Am I do I want shared decision making, or do I want like an opportunity for shared blame? And of course, I won't take any share of the blame, but I'll definitely point the finger at you for that. So we have to really do that reflection that we don't do as often as we should. Even after we said some things like, gee, why did I say it like that? Thanks. I think it was my bias that just came out, and take a moment and just say, after we've done the reflection, go back in the space and said, I don't think I really phrased that the best way. Let's start again. Let me share that. And I don't think that and I'm going to say we, I'll take it as well. I don't think we're as eager to do the self-reflection and then to circle back and say, let's start again.
Yeah.
Here's what I meant to say, in hopes that it'll be more of shared decision making. I think everything you're pointing out is really great. And I hope hundreds and hundreds of clinicians listen to this podcast and take a moment to really reflect, hey, how do I show up for shared decision making? And what is my intention? Um, and in the team, because I love it. I'm very much, as a leader, I was a service line administrator for 16 years. I'm very, very, very passionate about shared decision making. And I think the successes that our team had was because of that, because I feel like we're stronger together. There are things that I do very well and things that I don't do very well. I'm not a detail-oriented person, and I'll say that. Mary, I love research, but please don't give me a research article. I don't want to hear about the p-value. I don't want to, there's so many things there. I'm like, I don't want to hear about that. Give me the abstract, and give me your conclusion, right? So I know that about me, and I surround myself. So I know that other people have a wealth of knowledge and information and lived experience. And I always held space for that and made room for everyone, because you're right. We have to model the behavior that we want to see with our patients, with our families. And I just appreciate you saying, it starts with the team. I think that's a really great point. And I hope hundreds and hundreds of nurses listen and like, oh, okay, let's go ahead and start practicing that within our team so that it'll be a natural process with our providers, with our patients, with our other units, with lab and respiratory and PTOT, everybody else who collaborates, especially in the NICU. There's so many collaborators in the NICU space.
Because when I was hearing you talk about your interaction with the families, with the patients, and kind of making that connection, and then we from the neonatal team come in, we expect for them to just hand us their prized possession and trust us, right? What if we could actually model for the family and demonstrate to them that collaboration that we have as a team? So Rose, if this is your laboring patient and I'm coming in and you know that you're going to be handing the baby off to me, we need to demonstrate to the family that we're together because they already trust you. So you need to show them that you trust me, and maybe there'll be a tiny inkling that will say, if Rose trusts her, then I should too, right? I mean, I saw it when I was working with a midwifery team, and because they had worked with me outside of the hospital setting, if they had a patient who came into the hospital for whatever reason, it was, yep, I know Tracy, she got you. She's got your back. She's got your baby. And the families would look at me with this sense of, huh, okay. And the midwife and I would make a point to collaborate, to communicate, to talk, to share information in front of the family and include them in the conversation, right? So, okay, tell me about some of the labs. And the midwife would be like, labs for blah, 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 right, mom? Yep. Or Miss whatever, right? However they're going to address her. So, or Mr. or whatever, right?
Mhm.
But they have that communication and demonstrate that we were all on the same page, right? And if we could do that, we
Mhm.
do our
Mhm.
pre-briefing now as part of our golden hour. We meet with both teams, but
Mhm.
families don't see that.
Yeah.
And we need to show them that.
Mhm.
So again, these conversations, these circle times, when you bring the family
Mhm.
to the NICU for the first time, we need to have that conversation in front of the family. Hi, so
Mhm.
nice to meet you. You should be the one introducing them to me, right?
Totally.
And
Totally.
I don't know, maybe it would make a difference. I don't know.
It would absolutely make a difference, and in my space, we call that managing up, right? Because after I've created this amazing relationship with the patient, my shift ends, right? And Tracy is coming in. We're doing bedside shift report. I'm like, y'all, you are so lucky to have Tracy. She is the bomb.com, let me tell you. Because it does create that, oh, okay, Rose trusts Tracy. So therefore, I will trust Tracy as well. I do agree going into the NICU and introducing, the NNP and saying, oh my goodness, this is Jessie. She's so lovely. As a sidebar, I know Jessie doesn't mind me sharing. She had a NICU infant as well, so she really understands and she's going to walk you through. I agree. I agree that that's the modeling that Mary was talking about. I agree that that will really decrease the anxiety and will foster the relationships that we're all wanting to foster in the clinical setting.
But we don't do it because there's always been this sense of friction between the two units, right? Like, and again, I started my career in mother baby, and I remember what people thought about the postpartum nurses. And again, I'm not trying to offend anybody, but this is real life. Like, let's be realistic about it.
Right.
Many institutions that I've worked in, and part of it is not understanding each other's role, right? Not understanding that, no, I don't have a baby on the oscillator on postpartum, but I do have 5 couplets. So that is the equivalent of 10 patients, right? And yes, they're not critically ill, but have you ever tried to latch a baby on an engorged breast? Because I
Mhm.
have, and it's not fun, right? And
Mhm. Or
so
easy.
right? So there are different
Mhm.
nuances that go into it,
Mhm.
but because we don't sit and talk to each other and recognize where each other's coming from, we get this sense of you're not as good as me, right? You're not as busy as me. Your patients aren't as sick. Girl, bye. They may not be sick, but they are busy, and I've got my own things I'm dealing with over here. I haven't been to the restroom all day either. Okay. And so
Mhm.
if we could just talk more, like talk,
Agreed.
right?
Agreed.
Well, you're making me think of this concept of, relational stewardship, just really
Mm.
getting into it,
Mhm.
and the point that you were making, Trace, made me think about, like, in any given moment, whether it's NICU, L&D, antepartum, postpartum, we're all caring for the same families at any one given time, and we're caring for these families at different points along that continuum. And so we got to get it out of our heads that this is a competition, that somebody's more important than another because of some skill set, but that, and really reconnect with what it is that we're truly doing, right? Like, we're managing a human experience, through these different phases, and that in and of itself should be enough reason to, join together and foster that relational connection and stuff, so that we can really, share different elements, different aspects, not only of the patient and the family's journey, but also like ours, because when you went down the postpartum path, I'm like, oh gosh, I know what she's going to say, kind of a thing. But your point is well taken. It is a completely different, it's not better or worse. It's that binary stuff that totally gets us into trouble, I think, and to really take a step back and see we're all on the same team. We're caring for these amazing families that are having different challenges along, their human journey. And let's celebrate that. Let's, kind of come together and share the little tidbits.
One of the things I did as an educator that I still do, and I'm still an educator, is I like to foster that sense of community, sometimes from a place of control, right? Like, because when you're in a new grad orientation program, you got to go where I tell you got to go, right? So me and the labor and delivery and mother baby educator would intentionally create classes where all parties were together. So all of women's would take a trauma-informed care and implicit bias class together so that we could talk about what does this look like from everybody's perspective? Because like what you guys have already said, we are intersecting the patients from our perspective, but it's really the continuum of care for that patient, starting with a clinic visit, prenatal visits, all the way through labor and delivery, postpartum, and sometimes the NICU. So we could see real time as we're inviting them to kind of debrief some of these scenarios. We could see real time. We're like, oh, wait a minute. No, you don't know the rest of the story because I helped labor her 2 days ago. And let me tell you about what happened. So my first concern was like, well, you should know because that's report. You should know what happened 2 days ago. But now you know, right? Does that change how you perceived this patient, right? And then usually they'd be like, oh yeah, I had no idea any of that had happened. It's so much easier to just say, oh, that dramatic or crazy patient, or she's so difficult, and all the terrible things we say without understanding what has this person's life been like for the last 24 to 48 hours? What have we put them through? By either forcing them through it or not holding their hand through it. And I mean that in a compassionate way, like not being able to support them through systems that we might not on the individual level be able to change right now in this shift, but how can I guide you through this hopefully with the least amount of harm as possible? And I think we're missing that, right? Like everybody wants to prioritize their own perspective and I'm the most important, viewpoint, but it's just not about us in the end, y'all. Like, I don't know how many times we can be recorded saying that, but we say it almost every episode is it's just not about us. Like we're there in service of other. And we have to prioritize that so that we can maintain some glimpse or access to safety for all of these people that we're intersecting with.
Mm-hmm.
Reason why, that reality, that noble reality gets kind of, I don't know if this is the right word, but it's popping up like almost obfuscated, is that the way I've been acculturated into this role has been very competitive. It has been very performative. It has been very binary, all of those things. And if I haven't, Rose, when you mentioned earlier about the reflective piece, I mean, that should be embedded, that kind of, pedagogical principle should be embedded in every facet of how we develop from toddlerhood all the way up, right? To really begin to understand and unbundle my own story so that I'm not bringing crazy Mary into the scene and not even know she's standing right
Crazy.
next to me, right? Yeah, crazy, if but again, the intention of the system is to extract the performance out of us, right? I'm going to squeeze every bit of skill out of you. And if there's a little compassion in there, that's awesome too. And then I'm going to chuck your, dehydrated husk off to the side and grab in another new grad and wring that one out too. So if we can't see that, then and get curious about how we can disentangle ourselves from that, it's just going to keep happening. And we have wonderful pockets, and sometimes we have vast numbers of folks that are super compassionate and insightful, and they get it all together and stuff. And then we've got also an environment that's peppered with a lot of folks that are just totally bought into the performative, extractive mindset. And so, we need to kind of like figure out, it's two sides, right? How are we going to address this with all the legacy folks? And then how do we also begin to weave this, really important reflective, self-discovery or self-awareness component into how we, educate the next generation of healthcare professionals? Yeah, I don't know.
Mary, the truth of the matter is it's not mutually exclusive, right? You can be that very competitive. I mean, I love what you said about, because I think many of us go into certain specialties because we're adrenaline junkies.
Yes.
I am a confirmed adrenaline junkie. I was a transport nurse. I would get in helicopters. That's me,
Yeah.
right? So I can be an adrenaline junkie, love what I do, get excited and get passionate and enjoy the adrenaline, and be empathetic
Yes.
and be curious and be reflective. It's not mutually exclusive. So I just want to say that because because I was all of that. Not that it's about us. I heard you guys say it's not about us. It's not about me, but I was able to be all of that. And I think that's why I have longevity in the work, because I could find the things that speak to me, speak to my soul, make me feel, complete as a person, and also have the piece that um, from the patient perspective, the notes, the cards, the flowers back in the day, the chocolates I would get, from my patients, and beautiful things which fed my soul and my spirit, and I know that's why I have the longevity, and I know that's why I have the passion, because I could bring my full self
Yes.
into this amazing profession that we've been so blessed to be in, and care for these amazing patients and families that we've been so privileged. And I think that's what oftentimes that's the reminder that we need for us, right? So that we can experience those moments of joy, because, healthcare is so sucky right now, so incredibly sucky, that we need to find those moments of joy to remind people of our purpose and our why and how we can do all of those things.
I totally agree, right? Like in the grand scheme, it's not about us as far as making decisions for patients without including them, but something does have to be about us. We have to have a reason to show up, right? And
Amen.
everybody on this call had the capacity for both. We were technically skilled, we were good clinicians, but I was also a good person, right? I was coming from a place of trauma informed and, respect and all of those things. And you can absolutely do both. And I think we need to give more microphones to those people, right? Like
Agreed.
in every area that you can, so that you can understand that you don't just have to be the technical queen on your unit. Like you can have capacity for the full human experience and be highly skilled. That in itself, managing those two things is a skill that people want to acquire, right? And so it's being able to say, you can and should do both. It doesn't have to be a binary. You don't have to choose, like you walk across the stage and you just decide this is what I'm going to do. Like you, even into your career, have capacity for growth, right? A lot of new grads are very focused on skill acquisition because they realize that they're brand new and they're trying to be somebody with 15 years experience and they just can't be that person yet, right? So they're focused very much on technical skill. You're like, okay, cool. Now you feel like you're the world's best IV person for 2 years experience. You feel good with that. Now let's add a layer to it. Now let's keep growing so that we're not stuck in this stagnant place of everybody's just trying to beat each other out on a leaderboard. Like we're really trying to enrich the experience for all parties, ourselves included. Like we do matter.
Yes.
Because that then shows how we're able to show up and be able to do warm handoffs and know the colleague that you're trying to manage up. Right. Because sometimes you'll look around and you'll be like, oh, I don't know this person. I'm
Right.
sure she's wonderful. But like you can see straight through that. But if you're able to have
Right.
good relational connections with people, it's easy to go, oh yeah, girl, she's great, and this, this is going to be a good night for you. I just have such good feelings about how this is going to go, kind of thing. That's much more easy to do when you're coming from a place of wholeness than if you're coming from a place of, yeah, but that one time she messed up that blood culture and I'm never going to let her forget it.
Yeah. Good.
I love it.
This was wonderful. I appreciate your trust in our lackadaisical process, Rose. We always just get on and get started, but we always end up where we're supposed to be, is how I see it. Sometimes when I'm editing, I'm like, how in the world did we start here and end up here? But it makes sense somehow.
A skill and a talent that should be recognized. So congratulations. I'm going to give you your congratulations. Well, it was so nice to have time with you ladies.
Timeless Topics is Jesse Barnes, Tracy Bell, and Mary Coughlin. It is produced by Jesse Barnes and music from Carlos Bell. The thoughts and opinions shared here are those of the individual speakers and do not reflect the official policy or position for any of the speakers' employers or any other affiliated individual or entity.